So we'll go ahead and get started here. But again, welcome everybody for joining us today. Very excited to, we announced our partnership with BlackPoint between CyberFOX and BlackPoint Cyber a couple of weeks ago. And so we're excited to kind of use this webinar as a way to kind of jumpstart that and kind of start to tell the story of why both companies do so well together. And so we'll be diving into the how we're working together to bring layered, proactive, and efficient cybersecurity strategies that help MSPs of all sizes stay ahead of threats. Um, so as a way of introduction, so my name is Roberto Gutierrez. I run our global channel and strategic partnerships at CyberFOX. And joining me today on the BlackPoint side is Cam Goldman, who is their Director of Partnerships and Alliances. Cam, how are you?
I'm doing great, Berto. How are you?
I'm doing well. Excited about this strategic partnership between our companies and going to talk about it a little bit more. And then joining us as well today on the CyberFox side is Bill Morgan, my colleague. He's our Director of Technical Sales Enablement. Bill, how are you, sir?
I am doing well. I have to say, I'm jealous of Roman's hair in that photo, man. Ah, that is awesome. Everything's going great.
Awesome. And then Roman Soto from BlackPoint is here as well. He's one of the great sales engineers on the BlackPoint side. Thanks for joining us as well, Roman. How are you?
Yes, sir. Thank you for having me, Berto, and thanks for the call out, Bill. It took a lot of time during COVID to grow this out during the awkward phase, so that way it wasn't too big of a shock for everybody.
Man, that's awesome.
Yeah. Well, appreciate, and then again, appreciate everybody jumping on today and joining us. So, the reason why CyberFox and BlackPoint, why are we doing this? And it's really because over the last, let's say, 5 years, both companies have really started to solve similar problems. The world today is very different than it was 5 years ago. Obviously, we're seeing less companies have, fully on-site office environments. Remote working remotely is becoming more and more common, and so the security landscape has obviously changed. And as the cyber landscape continues to evolve at a rapid pace, right, MSPs are facing increasing pressure to defend their data, their systems, and ultimately their people. And so that's why partnerships like this one are more important than ever, because we're combining identity access management and privilege access protection with the best in class threat detection and response. So, today, according to Microsoft's vulnerabilities report last year, elevation of privilege accounting for more than 40% of total vulnerabilities in 2024. So bad actors are looking to steal credentials ultimately because they know that the most vulnerable access points are the users themselves. And then once a bad actor gets their hands on an account with that privileged access, they know they have access to whatever information that they want. And so additionally, ransomware was involved in 39% of those breaches, with small to medium sized businesses accounting for 88% of those ransomware related breaches. So, the days of SMB, small to medium sized companies, not being the top targets for bad actors, those days are completely gone. The idea of I'm a small organization, no one's thinking about my business, and no one wants access to my information, but that's just not the reality anymore. And so additionally, last year, more than 2.8 billion passwords were posted for sale or for free for the taking, whether hashed or otherwise. So, bad actors are finding new creative ways to get in. And if they're getting access to an account with privilege, there's a lot of damage that they can do with that information.
Yeah, thanks, Berto. And one thing before I even get into some of the numbers that we've seen on the BlackPoint side, and something just around our partnership that I think is so just exciting to be able to do here, is that we really share a common mission and ethos around protecting the identity, a real focus on making sure that the identity kind of as that leading breach point that we're seeing emerge, in such a robust way, is not only protected, but being done so in a way that isn't costing our customers an arm and a leg in efficiencies, right? Where, in many cases, the addition of new security tool sets is going to have a receipt associated to it, right? Like there is more time that you have to do to onboard those customers or to, get logged into some of these environments or, added complexity when you are trying to add, new business tools into those environments, right? And what I love is the joining of these forces is the way that we're doing it is we are elevating our customer security posture, but we're not taking away a huge cost of those, efficiencies and making sure that people are able to go about their day-to-day business in a really easy way. So just to hit on some of the things that our SOC at BlackPoint is seeing, and these numbers kind of change on a rolling 90-day basis, but some of the most recent ones, and I'll go right to the bottom left here, is that 30-1 for the cloud to on-prem response ratio. And that's, again, that's that focus on identity that the bad guys have, and that's the focus on making sure that we're in front of those bad guys and stopping them in their tracks. And that 30-1 is, so 30 responses, 30 cloud saves that our SOC team is undertaking to every one on-prem SOC save. So, the bad guys are trending in that direction. They certainly would love to get onto an endpoint, but they see, the easy path, all those password credentials getting leaked as kind of the way to be able to get their foothold into environments. So that breach point kind of leads to all of the other numbers that you start to see here, where that business email compromise starts to be undertaken once a bad guy's into your environment, or the large portion of the time where an EDR misses an attack and BlackPoint's able to step in. It's because the bad actor is actively working to avoid EDR. EDR has come in, they've done a really good job at protecting the customers from the things that they're built to protect. And in this cat and mouse game, the bad guys are going to look to evade that, right? They understand how the EDRs work, and identity is a great place to try and skirt what EDR is built to detect.
Yeah, all great points, Cam. And so now the question is, how do you prevent and mitigate these attacks? And it is by having a layered approach to cybersecurity. And that's ultimately why CyberFOX and BlackPoint have come together, is because with our two solutions, having that multi-layered approach creates multiple barriers between an attacker and your valuable data and your systems. And so there's no single point failure where, the walls all crumble when one defense layer is compromised. And it also protects you and your customers against diverse threats like malware, like phishing and ransomware. And so believe it or not, this approach also buys you time for detection and response if you do experience a breach, and response before serious damage is done. And so that we mentioned that bad actors are getting more creative and trying new things, and a multi-layered approach makes you adaptable, again, to this evolving threat landscape. And so when you think about, what should my cybersecurity stack look like? That's what MSPs are thinking about all the time, and what should that look like? And so we've come up with this circle of defense image where, you have those multi-layers, right? Where, the first thing to think about is your proactive approach, right? And that's where your privilege access management tool, like our CyberFOX's Auto Elevate, comes into play. Making everybody a standard user, so that they only have access to the information that they need. You're also preventing attack by, blocklisting and removing those vulnerable applications where bad actors are taking advantage of what we would call living off the land attacks. And we'll go into more depth of what that means. And then after those more proactive and preventative steps are taking, then you're getting into your detection and your response systems. And that's where BlackPoint comes into play. And so really what we want you to think about is, with that circle of defense, is, we want you to think of it as your house, right? You start by having a proactive approach, right? I mentioned the privilege access management. So that's where, if you have your house, think of it as you're closing all of your doors, you're closing all of your windows, you're locking all of that, so that it keeps the bad actors out. And then from there, you start implementing other tools that are detecting and responding to brute force attacks that are trying to break into your house. And that's where, again, the BlackPoint comes into play. And so you're getting that best in class alarm system for your house for, when you have all your doors and windows closed, if someone is still trying to break into the windows, BlackPoint comes in and is going to be able to notify you immediately and take care of those threats for you. So the quote here that you can see, would you rather catch a thief in your house or just make sure he can't get through the door? And so, we kind of we're able to attack kind of both sides of that, with our two solutions together.
So when you shared that circle of the defense in depth with me initially, I was really excited to see that, because I was like, oh, great, I've got something similar on the BlackPoint side where, ours isn't a circle, but it's the same idea, right? We're looking at how we can help our customers really kind of create a very secure posture, right? Make sure that things at the gate are stopped when things get potentially through the gate, that there is a path there to remove them and to remediate and to then, close that gate, right? And put an extra padlock on it or whatever it is that's necessary, right? To ensure that folks aren't getting back in. So very similarly and very, again, to that partnership and our joint, ethos, that we really want to make sure that we're protecting our customers across the entire stage of, okay, all the way from asset visibility and making sure that the things that you need to protect, all the way through to the idea that, look, this is cybersecurity cat and mouse. No one's ever going to be batting 1,000%. It's just not possible. But in those rare occurrences where you do, lose a yard or, have a strikeout, right? Like, who's there to back you up and who's there to ensure that, you've got the right tools in place to ensure that a customer isn't going to go down for days, weeks on end, whatever it is, and put them out of business. So BlackPoint's built a full platform to really cover this full, left of boom type of posture. And we're going to put these tools in place with our customers. We're going to make sure that their posture is stood up into a place where, at best, we're protecting and preventing any of these threats from getting in. And then we are ready and able to remove the threats when they do inevitably, perform in a way that is so persistent that they have the, ability to get into an environment. But, we stop them from being able to do damage. So that's kind of my version of the house.
Yep, absolutely. And so, that ultimately leads to why both CyberFOX and BlackPoint are better together. And why is this valuable to you and your business? We're combining, again, our privileged access management and real-time threat response to block and mitigate those attacks, which is, and we're doing it in a way that is going to reduce that manual work, for your IT team. So we're actually going to go into a demo of both products here shortly, in just a minute, so that you can actually see it in action, so that we can show you, how we're able to help your business be more efficient. We are also replacing, those overlapping tools with a unified security solution. You're getting two solutions here that are giving you exactly what you need, and not necessarily, more bloated products out there that are giving you, probably more than you need, or, you have features that you're not using, which ultimately is going to lower, and our two products together do also lower that total cost of ownership. And so, we're preventing those attacks, with proactive detection and access control. And, again, ultimately, we're delivering that layered protection that is going from the endpoint, to the cloud itself. So, yeah. So like I said, we're going to go into a demo of both products here. So I'm going to turn it over to my colleague Bill here to go over Auto Elevate. And, again, want to keep promoting to ask questions as they come up. I imagine this is especially where a lot of those are going to come up. So, but yeah, Bill, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Sweet. Thank you very much. Appreciate that. All right, let me share my screen. Do, 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 do. All right, you guys should be able to see that, right? Yes, no, maybe?
I see some
Yes.
trees in the forest.
What about auto elevate? See that now?
I do
No,
not.
Not yet.
Yeah.
All right, hold on. Let's see what Zoom's doing here.
And there is one question asking if the slide deck will be available. Yes, definitely. We'll be following up today's session with the deck itself as well as a recording.
All right. All right, you guys should be able to see me. We good?
Yes.
Yeah.
Excellent. All right, so let's start this thing off. So I'm gonna take you through a few minutes of auto elevate, and then we're gonna let Roman take over after that and show you guys a few minutes of BlackPoint. So auto elevate essentially is it's a privilege access management solution, just in a nutshell, and it allows us to track it allows us to safely use privilege, and it helps us to achieve a few core security principles. So one of those being help you move towards the concept of zero standing privilege, right? The removal of administrator accounts, which thereby sort of strangling access to privilege, and then being able to provide what we call just enough privilege. So it's just enough to do what you need to do, and then start to bring in the concept of just-in-time access. And I'm going to show you a little bit of what that looks like. So let's start with just the basics. When we have a machine out there, it's going to be an agent, so it's going to be installed on that particular endpoint. A couple of key things that we're looking for is we want to make sure that UAC is turned on, up, and set where it's supposed to be. For those that aren't familiar with UAC, it's usually the really annoying box that pops up that says, do you want to let this make changes to your computer, right? In some way, shape, or form. And a lot of times, and I noticed this in the poll earlier, where it was a bit over, I want to say 50% on the, do you have a mix of admin and standard users, right? So it was that part was above 50%. So that tells me that a lot of people still give out the ability to have privilege, and then they can basically use that whenever they want. The problem is nobody pays attention to when that little box pops up. And it could say something like, I'm going to blow up your computer.exe, and nobody would read it, and they would just go, yes, that's for me. Let's run this thing. So we want to be able to document that and control that. So we want to make sure we're set at the highest levels possible to ensure the most coverage of security to protect the most things that people are after. Let's face it, the prime objective of almost every malware, and probably Cam and Roman can kind of substantiate this, is that the prime objective is gain credentials and escalation. Basically, the foundational building blocks of almost every malware ransomware framework that's out there is predicated on its prime objective of achieving credentials and gaining privilege escalation, because that's where all the soft little underbelly of Windows resides, right? So this is designed to help us make sure that, one, we don't have a lot of administrators out there. We want to make sure that we can see, where that privilege has been doled out, and if need be, as you can see right here, we can actually start to take effect and remove some of those privileged accounts. So if I did have myself in this group, whatever, I would be able to remove myself, have the system remove me out of there. So the next time I logged in, I would not be an administrator. All right. Now there's a few functions. So let's take a look at some of the things that we're doing. So there is elevation control. Elevation control, which I'm going to do in a couple of use cases here, is the ability to control access to Windows through UAC, which is the only gateway that allows you to access anything that has to do with privilege within Windows. If you've ever worked on a computer without the administrator account, that usually lasts about 10 minutes, and either you throw it away or you reformat it, right? Because it's actually pretty secure if you don't have an administrator account. But when you have admin, you have access to everything. So the first thing we want to do is control elevation. That gives us access to control UAC in a safe and secure manner. We'll see that in just a minute. Another mode is block listing. So this is another core component of what Auto Elevate's doing, and it's focused specifically on living off the land style attacks. The ability to use Windows programs that are built in against you. right? And you're going to see Roman talk about third-party programs and how to block those things. What we're focused on is more of just like the sysinternals tools, right? So PS exec, for example, C script, W script, things like that. Like those are legitimate Windows programs, and this is going to help us to create some rules and policies so we can block those. And then technician access, which we're also going to demonstrate a little bit today and show you how you can get technicians can easily work on devices. So elevation is controlled mostly through what we would call policies. So essentially what this is going to do is it's going to go out there and capture all of the different events that are coming in and all the different reasons why people are trying to use privilege, whether that is to install Adobe, for example, or you can probably feel this pain, update UPS World Ship, or maybe it's the Revit stuff from Autodesk, or we're trying to do security software installs or updates or things like that. So there's a whole lot of reasons why we need to use privilege to do a number of different things. This is going to allow us to evaluate that, and then ultimately we can take those events, turn them into some policies so that we can control how we want to allow access to, all of the different things that would require admin and do that in the safest way possible. That's the most critical thing. We do want to help people move away from having live, always on active administrator accounts and move more towards what we're doing, which is allowing us to elevate without actually having an administrator account active all the time. That's our little secret sauce. We can talk about that when you guys want a demo. So basically, you have a number of ways to look through the policies and create the type of policy you want. Even if you wanted to do things based on like a particular vendor, for example, right? If I was want to say, you know what, Autodesk is okay, or maybe it's Adobe or UPS or Intuit for QuickBooks. So if you wanted to approve things based fully on the publisher data, absolutely possible. You can also all of the different file attributes, wildcards, regular expressions, all kinds of cool toys that you can use to basically get what you want and create the right policies. These things are focused on something I mentioned earlier of just enough privilege. That's our focus. We want to make sure that we're not just opening up admin sessions. Otherwise, what's the point? If we're just going to give you full admin to do whatever you want, why even bother? So we want to be able to give you admin on what it is, only the things that you need to actually have admin for, and only for the time that you need to do it. That's a critical component. Now let's bounce over. Let's look at a couple of different use cases. So I'm going to start with a program just downloaded from the internet, just like all of us do, right? We go find some cool program we like. We go download it. We're like, ooh, I use this at home. This is really cool. I'm going to use this at work. Now, a lot of people, over half of us, according to the poll, have admin capability. So this would just install. But when we look at it a little more closely, we can start to identify where, some of those things may not be quite so good, and we might not want to let that thing go and be installed. So this is us actually taking over the process. One of the things that, we have to always be considerate of is we want to make sure that we implement the security we want. In this case, I don't want admin accounts around, and I don't want people having admin access because that leads to people being able to do whatever they want, and it makes it nice and easy for malware, ransomware, and everything else to get a good foothold. So if we don't have any admin accounts, it really reduces our overall threat surface area tremendously by, up to like 90+%. And the other thing that we want to do is balance that security that we want with a awesome customer experience. Our customers expect that they are going, they don't want to have productivity interrupted. They don't want to be annoyed. They don't want to have to call you. Let's face it, it's super frustrating when somebody has to sit around for 4 hours and wait for one of your techs to dial in and dial in. That's old school right there. That's showing some age. Holy cow, remote in and type out some credentials, right? That's super frustrating. You guys don't feel that, I think, on the MSP side because you have all the keys to all the castles. You can do whatever the heck you want. Your customers, however, they don't have that. And it's super frustrating when I see somebody come in here and just literally just type out a password. I'm like, I waited 4 hours for that. That's ridiculous. So here we're going to give them what I would consider to be a delightful experience. So let's look at that. So I'm going to say, I love this text editor. I'm going to beg a little bit. Please let me install. Please, sir. So we're going to go ahead and send that in. All of what you're seeing is completely customizable. So you can customize this entire experience. So you can see I've got this pending request. I'm going to go take a look at it and review it. And I already see some stuff that I don't like. This is some some off-the-shelf software. I don't like that. I don't like the fact it's not valid. You know what? I'm going to have to say no on this one. So, but for right now, we're just going to go ahead and deny that request one time. But it does give me all of the information that I need to understand what it is they're actually asking for. I know they love this text editor and they're begging for me to let them install it, but I can't do that, right? The security of this isn't where I want it to be. I can see all the details. I notice there's no certificate data. Flat out, I just don't like it. So I've told them I'm sorry, we can't do it, but we want to do that, in relatively a nice way. Sometimes a little levity always helps. Sorry, this is restricted under the company policy. Hey, you know what? Don't feel bad. We even deny Batman sometimes. All right. And again, you can be as serious as you want. You can be as funny as you want. Some people appreciate a little bit of humor, but you can see that we're dialoguing on your behalf, so you don't have to actually interact. We're dialoguing on your behalf so that we can take care of the conversation and all of the different escalation points that might need to happen. Now, of course, if you have a policy for something, that's even easier. Then there's no real interaction at all. It's super simple. So I basically just go to execute whatever program it is. You can see those credentials went right in right away. And then now we're basically setting up our software and we're ready to rock and roll. No fuss, no muss. I don't need to be involved, but I've provided access to exactly what, they need to have access for. Now, if I try to get a little bit, a little forceful maybe, so we can do that. At the same time, again, I can get in there and I can say, you know what, sorry, this is just, it's against our policy. We're just not going to allow this. So what can we allow? Let's try to find something we can let them run. Let's try this one. Now I'm going to do something a little extra. So I'm going to take this to my cell phone and I'm going to open up my Auto Elevate app and I'm going to go ahead and send this request in. So we're going to say, need to install some stuff. I know that's not a good enough reason, but this is probably the kind of stuff you're going to get. So we'll send that in. You can see I just immediately got the notification. So let's go ahead and answer that. So I'm going to go ahead and review that request. Everything's looking pretty good, green across the board. That's the kind of stuff I want to see. So overall, I like it. This Bill Morgan guy, super annoying, but you know what? I'll let him pass this time. So we're going to approve it. I'll give him this request one time. And then you can see on the screen, instantaneous approval. Let's go ahead and run that now because as an end user, I am super impatient. I don't want to wait for anything. Now we have this running in an elevated command prompt. I'm still a standard user. I've only been granted access to just the things that I need access to. And if you got any questions about the stuff that I'm talking about, put it in the chat. And as soon as I stop sharing, I can jump in there and answer any of those questions while Roman's going through his portion of this. So another thing that I want to talk about really quick too is technician mode. So at the same, I don't want you guys using credentials. And so in order to do this properly, I need to give you a way to work on a device without having access to any credentials. So let's do this. I'm going to grab my camera here, QR code. We're going to scan this on my phone. So that is all you need to do. You just take out your phone, you scan the QR code. Now I have full access. Now earlier you saw me try to get away with running PowerShell as an administrator and you saw that I got blocked. But now that we're in technician mode, let's try that again. So we're going to evaluate it, check the file hash. So now that I'm in technician mode, I can do whatever I want. At this point, all rules are suspended. So I don't have to worry about like the security software getting in my way of doing my job, right? I can take, and the great part about the QR code, having your phone available, things like that, I can work on any computer, anywhere, anytime, without having to access their username, their password, the shared administrator account, none of that jive. All I got to do is scan the code, and then if I'm ready, I simply push the button, watch the credentials. Excellent. Rotation. That's doing a double password rotation. It moves itself in and out of the local admin group, and then we do a little bit of token manipulation in the background. But ultimately, that account is promoted and demoted and double password rotated every single time it's used. So it's incredibly safe and secure. All right, so that's technical access. So the last thing I want to show you guys before I turn this over to Roman, and I think this is Roman, this is going to lead into I think what you're going to show here in just a minute. But I want to show you the blocking capability, and I've done a little bit of I wrote a little script just to mirror some a simulation of some malware that we actually put into a sandbox and played with. So I'm gonna take this handy dandy trust me file, because you should always click stuff that says trust me, because that's what everybody does. The curiosity gets the best of us. So I'm gonna go ahead and run that. And basically what I've done is I've simulated a number of foothold steps that I'm trying to use to gain a foothold on this machine. Some things we're allowed to execute. I've executed my freak out mode, and now they're freaking out. They're like, what do I do? And then, of course, we want to make sure that all of the real things that would allow them to get hold of and root into the system have actually been blocked. So if you look closely, you can see that we tried to download a toolkit using a Windows utility. Access was blocked. We tried to run some scripting modules inside of Windows, also blocked. So a couple of key things, registry access, whatever it is, having Blocker running allows us to take a lot of different tools and utilities that are completely legit in Windows. So when AV goes to run, yes, that is a legitimate hash. When EDR runs, yeah, those are legitimate hash. That's why sometimes you need the guys at BlackPoint to cover some of the tradecraft stuff where they're trying to get really sneaky. But
Sure.
now, so this allows me to take off and say, look, I'm going to take, there's a number of these programs. There's over 200 scripts, binaries, and scripts, executables. Probably refer to them as lol bins, you lol scripts and stuff like that. I'm sure you've heard that term. So ultimately, what we're trying to do is just take that list of heavily used building blocks for most malware and ransomware type utilities and frameworks, and we're trying to take that whole thing just off the table entirely, right? But that is, again, those are all built-in Windows utilities. Now, let me stop sharing, and I'm going to turn it over to Roman, because then he's going to talk about what you can do going forward when you start to move more into application control. I mean, hopefully this will really show you guys the difference. Roman, if you want to take it over, brother, it's all yours.
Yes, sir. So we should be good to go.
I got you. I see you.
Perfect. And then with that transition to Bill's point, looking at how we will tackle the application control and how that would, in theory, overlap or have that symbiosis with Auto Elevate as an example, we have our own curated rules for applications based off of the SOC, right? So anything that has a known vulnerability or a lateral vulnerability that could be used to gain access to any of the payloads like endpoints or user accounts, we track based off of the tactics from MITRE, based off of their tactics and techniques. So anything that you would see typically from, say, a privilege escalation, granted, this will be certain components like juicy potato or petite potato, rotten potato, as a, say, script or as a process that is run based off of any of that malicious activity. The other side of that, right, we're looking at the file paths, the MD5s, the SHAs around those applications as well. The next that I typically show is lateral movement, monitoring any of those events from a SOC perspective. If we see any activity that could be malicious or suspicious with those users, right, or with their devices. If we see that we have one machine in the environment that is allowed based off of that, but then we see that same communication or that same process or traffic happen from a different device, we're doing that same blocking and tackling from the proactive side, right? So on one side with Auto Elevate and CyberFOX, right, you have the preventative layer where they're knocking everything out at the get-go on the front lines. And then on the reactive side, at least from the application control, we're able to lock that down if they're able to make it past any of those preventative measures based off of that circle of defense, based off of those that layered approach, right? All of those applications, just to give you an example, and any of those alerts would be fed through into our SOC console here. This will be deprecated as we evolve with the visibility that we're ingesting. But the way that it will present itself currently is any of the cloud activity, regardless of the devices. Say if we don't have an integration directly with an EDR platform, as an example, we're still able to tap in directly to that cloud tenant and track what is happening on the back end, right? So not just stopping it outright, but understanding this user here, Dominique, as an example, what are they doing with their account? It looks like at this alert, we have a suspicious inbox rule that was created. By itself, could be benign, could be suspicious, but nothing as far as outwardly malicious. And then we would see certain other toggles here, right? As far as proxies, are they leveraging a Tor to exfiltrate data or leveraging a tunnel to enumerate from that same standpoint, right? So with our SOC, we're able to lock that activity down, either by disabling the full account or just disabling any of the messaging rules or any of the exfiltration rules that are set up by that trade craft. So that's one way, right, as far as a symbiosis there that we would integrate with the Auto Elevate platform. So that way you have that broader visibility, not only for the necessary blocking and tackling, but also from an auditing standpoint in the artifacts, showing the indicators of attack around that. Okay. Now, outside of just the applications, right, we're looking at the traffic, like I mentioned, from, say, Exchange or SharePoint as an example, once we tie into that tenant. So we would look for things as far as impossible travel. This catches a lot of us SEs at the BlackPoint side, since we travel for trade shows often. And sometimes we don't alert the SOC, right, to that, that travel. And so if we're going from, as an example, California to Florida, and we stop at a coffee shop in Texas, right? Try to access certain applications that might not be in our purview, right? Or the SOC's purview because we didn't alert them. That we're drinking our own champagne in that workflow, and our accounts are being disabled, but we're getting that same phone call from the SOC within that 12-minute time frame. So that way we can confirm, is this activity approved? Is it required? What's the variables here that we need to take into account? And they clear that up within that matter of, like I mentioned, 12 to 30 minutes. Right. Then we're looking at other aspects. Are we changing anything from that user account? Are they failing based off of brute force attempts? Not only just in accessing applications, but just gaining access into their session, right? To be productive in their day. And so that's where we can toggle on or off the notifications that your team sees from an alert fatigue standpoint, but the SOC will still be able to respond to those alerts real time as they happen. Okay. And then that will also relate to Exchange, right? So the same thing that you would see not only on the user sessions, but anything as far as those same suspicious inbox rules that you saw from the SOC perspective, looking at things as far as data loss prevention in a roundabout way. We're trying to hit, not necessarily trying, we are evolving to the landscape as far as security is concerned. So that way we're locking things down based off of browser-based apps or mobile apps, as an example, right? This is one roundabout way, since we don't have a direct agent for MDM devices, as an example, that we're still able to provide that level of security and visibility to those expanding and scalable environments, right? That digital transformation workflow that happened back in 2018 and so on is something that has made security somewhat of a moving target. And that's what we are aspiring to cover as far as that field. Right. And then not only are we blocking and tackling on the front end, but we're also, like I mentioned, ingesting anything that you would see based off of a compliance or auditing board for your teams there, right? To where based off of things like privileged account changed, as we're elevating them real time, we're able to note that based off of these data points here. And then we would be able to map that to, say, CMMC level 1, 2, or 3 for you. And this is auto mapped based off of our processes. And so you would have that from any of the metadata logs based off of, say, an example like CMMC level 2. So this takes a lot of, or some of the heavy lifting from your teams in having those monthly or quarterly business reviews with your end clients. As far as are we compliant in certain fields, where can we improve, right? Now that we have this platform from the BlackPoint Cyber perspective, where can we go to become anticipatory, not just proactive, right? We're waiting and expecting any threats to come through, and we want that so that way it proves the return on investment based off of the platform. Perfect. And then all that to say, right, we're also tracking that from a vulnerability assessment perspective to where we're making sure that we're reducing that attack surface. So while we are being proactive or anticipatory, we're also providing that visibility to the teams. As far as the secure score from a device perspective, making sure we have those patches in place so that way there wouldn't be any vulnerabilities around that cloud activity or the user activity. Same thing, locking it down from an external scan as an example, making sure that we have the ports locked down as necessary or firmware as necessary for those end devices. And then last but not least, mapping everything based off of CIS and their security benchmarks, which will have tie-ins and overlaps based off of, say, DLP from data management or privilege escalations and account authentication based off of CIS. So all that to say, right, with the conversation that we're having today, this goes all circles back to that circle of defense and that layered approach. I did see in the chat there, John had mentioned that he had a couple different layers of approach, and this is the way that we would want to service that for the team by integrating or ingesting any of those logs, right, to enrich the overall artifacts that your team will see. And then from there, being able to map that from a compliance layer to show that we have everything covered from a security standpoint. Now, with that, I can pass back over to the team so that we have time for Q&A. I did see a couple that were coming through, so we can knock that out.
Yeah, definitely. Appreciate that, Bill, Roman. That was great. There were some questions that have come up that we've answered, but I want to make sure that we also answer them live for the recording purposes. One question, Bill, that came up was what happens if someone's offline? Does auto elevate still work? And do you mind just kind of answering that one live for everyone?
Absolutely. So, yes, it still works offline from a policy standpoint. So most of the time when something's offline, like in the cases, it might be like a ship that goes offshore and the admin functions of the ship, the programs that run all those things have to run as admin. Those are easy, you set them all up as policies, the ship goes offline, all the policies run, system works great. No issues with that. In other cases, it might be a troubleshooting scenario where a customer system is offline or they can't connect to the internet, whatever the case might be. In that situation, none of your other tools work either, right? Your RMM's dead in the water, your remote control's dead in the water, anything else that you're using that talks to the cloud, dead in the water. So with a couple of strategically placed elevation policies, you can actually mitigate probably 90-95% of those scenarios. Usually it's working with network config, changing DNS settings, getting them to a network that works, fixing Wi-Fi settings and things like that. So with a couple of strategically placed policies, usually you can walk them right through. It will automatically elevate to allow those changes to occur. And then, you can get them back online. And as soon as that happens, then all of your other tools, come back that you can use. And the same focus for JIT. Like usually the focus is just get the machine online because nothing works these days pretty much without internet. And luckily we live in an age where internet's pretty close to everybody, pretty much wherever they are, which is pretty good. So hasn't been much of an issue. And we can, if you have even more specific scenarios, we can sit down and discuss what it is you need to do. And then we can figure out how to create some policies that allow you to get your way around that. And then to finally wrap that up, obviously it's entirely up to you. If you decide you want to have that backdoor emergency zombie apocalypse admin account, I would say, fine, do that. Use tools like Laps, which are free. That'll give you that functionality. And then make sure that you put extra effort into protecting those passwords and truly using them as actual emergency break the glass accounts. You wouldn't pull the fire alarm in the building unless there was a fire. You shouldn't use that account unless there's a really, really, really good need. Again, I mentioned it earlier, you want to starve the bad guys for the one thing and everything, and literally every report, every malware, every ransomware, every fundamental building block of every hack, its primary focus is get credentials, gain escalation. So if you can find it to work and get rid of administrator accounts and rely on your PAM, then you know, you can get a lot done. And for the edge cases that slip through the cracks, talk to us. We'll figure out a way to help mitigate.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Bill. And then as we're answering these next couple questions, I also want to make sure that I clarify, so as part of our Better Together story, what you're able to do starting a couple weeks ago is you can purchase both CyberFOX Auto Elevate as well as BlackPoint via CyberFOX. So you can consolidate your billing that way. And so the CyberFOX team can work with you if you're interested in both products. This QR code connects you directly with one of our representatives here. So, we can certainly help you there. Another question, Bill, that came up that I wanted to answer live, and then I've got a BlackPoint question here. Does Auto Elevate work with Azure?
In what sense?
Especially AVD is
Yeah,
the
yeah.
question from
The
Lonnie.
agent works. It's just an agent, so as long as it's Windows, it's not a problem. So it works on, like RDS servers and, most Windows servers. It works on desktops, it works on virtual machines, pretty much as long as it has Windows on it and all the core libraries and stuff like that. It's not like a POS system or something where it's stripped out, then it should work just fine.
Okay. And then I'll answer this second part from Lonnie, who's an Auto Elevate partner today, asking if there are documents that we can provide that he can share with customers that explains in a way they can understand why they are revoking admin accounts. We do have those documents, and since you're already an Auto Elevate partner of ours, we'll work with your account manager to get those documents over to you. So we'll get that taken care of, Lonnie. And then a question that I saw on the BlackPoint side was just where your SOC locations are. Cam or Roman, if you could expand on that.
Yeah, so we have stock locations in the US, primarily looking at Tampa and Maryland. We have some follow the sun locations across the globe in the UK and we have some in New Zealand. So we're able to cover our customers 24/7, and the SOC today is English speaking, but again, have those locations throughout the globe.
Awesome. Thank you.
Hey Cam, there's a question there about I think Jack is kind of having this question about he doesn't see the Better Together story because we're, the integration thing. Maybe you can go into the reasoning and Roberto about why we decided to partner up and ultimately, what that means for everybody else.
Yeah, so in some kind of work prior to the partnership, we've identified a number of MSPs and customers that are buying both solutions today. Because of that overarching story, I think that they recognize where identity protection is very core, getting a little bit of an extra kind of layer on application control. And we, again, because we have some of these meshes within our product set, even though they aren't technically integrated, we wanted to make that procurement path easier for those customers. And we decided to partner and be able to extend our solution through the CyberFOX team to make it that much easier for customers to acquire, to bill, to make sure that they have a more seamless and frictionless experience when using two of those products together.
Yep, I would agree with that. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I would also add that a lot of times when it comes to a security stack, you don't get a lot of people don't get all of their security tools from a single vendor. Most vendors don't have everything that you need in order to do it. So you do end up working with disparate vendors and disparate sales cycles at different times. one of the things that we've done is we can actually resell BlackPoint. So you can now deal with a single vendor in order to get the, a majority of the security suite that you need. Again, a lot of security tools don't integrate. What we wanted to do was start with making it an easy experience, right? That you could get behind, have a single vendor to work with to cover like a large stack of what you need to do from a security standpoint. So I hope that makes
Yeah.
sense. But that's why we wanted to put this relationship together, is things like that and the synergies between our companies. And eventually we'll look at how we can take this to the next level with some integrations and stuff like that.
Yep, absolutely. And actually, Bill, another question for you, because I know you work in this space a lot. John was asking if we have sample policies that can be used with Auto Elevate. I'm assuming this is like when you get started. If you don't mind just kind of talking through, the first implementation steps that are taken and how Auto Elevate helps our partners do that. And then after you finish that, Roman, if you don't mind kind of speaking to the onboarding process with BlackPoint as well.
Yeah, on the auto elevate side, really the elevation portion of this is it's your experience, right? If you would put your credentials in and give admin to a program that you were running, then you might, that's okay. Then build a rule for that. You're just taking your experience of what you have and inputting it in. It's a lot easier and simpler a process to just simply usually just run the program you want as an administrator, grab that event, turn it into a rule, move on to the next program. That way it makes it a little bit easier and faster to get some of those key policies out of the way quickly. The challenge with trying to do pre-built rules is I'd have 10,000 rules in there, 100,000 rules in there, and 99,950 of those wouldn't even apply to you. And so it'd just be a mess to go through because you have to deal with file hashes and certificates and expired certificates and all that stuff like that. So it's easier just to drill it down to run as admin, grab the event, turn it into a policy. And on the blocking side, we have a recommendation engine. So there's nothing you really need to do there. Basically, just let it run. It'll make some recommendations, tell it to add the rules, and let it ride. Roman?
Yes, sir. Thanks, Bill. And on our side, we do have tuning guides based off of, say, the cloud posture, and any of that traffic as far as like the notifications that the team would want to be alerted to. Granted, the socket themselves, they have their own standard operating procedures, typically following, say, like MITRE's operating stance, to where they will respond to those threats based off of their guidelines. But for the team, as far as the notifications, we do have a tuning guide there. And then we do provide general recommendations as far as configuration, because we will track cloud drift, right? So we're looking at those CIS benchmarks on one side from a Microsoft standpoint. So that way, if there are functions that aren't properly configured or could be improved, we're pointing that out in the console. And then in a future release for BlackPoint, we are looking to have a broader security posture management or rating for the teams. So that way you can gauge what is going well, what can be improved upon, and that would be agnostic of a compliance board, right? So you would be able to, in theory, map that to something like CMMC, CIS, PCI, to name a few. But yes, there are general recommendations there.
Awesome. Thanks for answering that, guys. So we are at time. So again, want to thank everybody for joining us today. Cam, Roman, Bill, thank you so much for joining me in this. And like I said, the QR code, if you have more questions, feel free to schedule some time with someone on the CyberFOX side. If you are already an Auto Elevate partner and want to learn more about BlackPoint, please contact your account manager that you already have. And yeah, again, very excited about this partnership between CyberFOX and BlackPoint. It's a story that goes really well together. Again, solving a lot of the same problems and kind of joining forces will provide a better experience for our partners. So if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to the folks at CyberFOX. And again, thank you so much for your time. Everyone, have a great rest of the day.